In this week's monologue, you're going to learn some amazing tips and tricks on getting more customers and delivering an outstanding customer experience and driving your revenue. And the tactics that I'm going to share were all learned from a couple recent trips abroad that I've had to different countries. And it's amazing. I found these business lessons in these vacations that I was taking, quite frankly, but I couldn't help but see these little business lessons pop up, and I wanted to share those with you. You know, travel allows us to experience other cultures and ecosystems and, the customs of a different country and really how life is lived compared to how we live life in the United States. And, I've shared myriad examples with you on amazing customer service experiences and business growth stories from companies here in America and American practices. But today it's going to be fun to share, what I learned in my travels to other nations. But, before we get into that, I also wanted to share with you, because I'm excited about this, and announce our fast growing company that helps rapidly scale and grow small and mid-sized businesses. More importantly, it's giving owners some breathing room so that they can work on their own business, not in the business and in the mud. ThriveMore Autopilot helps brick-and-mortar fitness, recovery, wellness studios generate a river of new leads, work those leads through proprietary conversational AI software that is proprietary to our company, ThriveMore Autopilot, in addition to real human beings we employ here in the States to make thousands of phone calls to your prospects, your new leads and your old leads, to squeeze the value out of your sales funnel. It's all with the goal of, booking dozens of new clients every week so that your business grows and you have more take-home profit. If you're looking for more money and way less stress, check out ThriveMore AI. That's thrivemore.ai. And this is specifically for brick and mortar health, wellness, recovery studios. So getting back to traveling abroad and the lessons I've learned, I want to start with my most recent trip, which was to Australia. It was my first time to Australia. And my wife and I spent 2 weeks there, longest vacation I've ever had as an adult, and thoroughly enjoyed it. The people were amazing. The country is beautiful, the topography and just the different ecosystems. It's a wonderful place, and the people are just nice as they can be. But beyond the gorgeous beaches and of course the Sydney Harbor with the Opera House is just, it's beyond words. I inadvertently picked up some valuable business lessons that I want to offer to you. These were just little micro moments that sparkled and made me think, I need to talk about this. The first one happened on the flight over. It's a long flight. It's a 16-hour flight. And we'd already flown from Charlotte to Los Angeles and spent the night in Los Angeles so that we could break up the trip. And then we boarded the plane to Sydney, which is a 16-hour flight. And my wife, being the brilliant woman she is, much smarter than me, she went to, it's like a Walgreens or CVS something there in Los Angeles by our hotel, and bought a nice box, like the nicest box of chocolates that they have, to give to the flight crew who was overseeing our section and would be caring for us for the next 16 hours straight, right? So once we boarded, we got settled and everything, my wife gave this box of chocolates to the flight attendant and simply said, I know this is a long route for you guys. My husband and I, are very appreciative of the hard work you do. Thank you in advance. You know what this is? This is the age-old concept of reciprocity. But what it showed me is that the smallest gesture can return disproportionate gains. You can get a disproportionate return by just going first with the law of reciprocity, meaning when you give somebody something, they feel obligated to give you something back. That's just who we are as human beings. Do you think that our wine glasses ever sat empty on that flight? We wanted extra pillows. They appeared out of nowhere. What else can we do for you? What else do you need? Can I get you anything else? It was 16 hours straight of tender, loving care from that flight crew for my wife and I. And I was wondering if I even wanted to deplane, if I wanted to get off the plane in Sydney, because the experience was so great going over. And I was dreading it at first, but it turned out to be fantastic. So, some people would call this like an ethical bribe. I think that's too strong a language. I prefer to call it an investment in someone's happiness. That box of chocolates showed the flight attendants in our section that someone thought of them as more than just a flight attendant, and that they're a real person doing a job with really long hours in the service industry. So, a lot of times it doesn't have to be a tangible item. It doesn't have to be a gift. A simple thank you in advance or acknowledgement of your appreciation goes a long, long way. And so here's my challenge to you. What inexpensive item or service offering that has low cost to you can you give a prospect or even a current client that will generate a disproportionate return for you or for your business? And is this practice standardized in your business, or does it only happen sometimes, right? A lot of times we'll do that. We'll figure out something that works, but we won't standardize it. We won't institutionalize it. Have various approaches been trialed by you or your staff to see, which items or which free offering that I can gift to a prospect or to a current customer gets the highest conversion rate or makes it that current customer even stickier. These are really worthwhile experiments to do for any small and mid-sized business. Any business owner that owns a smaller mid-sized business, especially a brick and mortar that's got a physical presence, you should be doing this and doing this on a routine basis because reciprocity is alive and well and always has been, always will. Another lesson from that trip to Australia was the concierge at the first hotel we stayed at, which was the Marriott there in Sydney. And I actually learned two lessons from this guy. Solomon was his name. And I learned just watching and interacting with him two great things. One, and I say some of these things I'm not even learning, and maybe you're not learning, but it's reinforcing, like reciprocity. I knew about that, but just to see it in action, again, reminds me how important it is, and it made me challenge my own practices in my own business. Same thing for this next example about building brand advocates and loyal fans. There were these little individually wrapped chocolate biscuits called Tim Tams. Turns out it's a thing in Australia. Like it's a thing. It's like their national, chocolate treat. And I got to tell you, it was yummy. But the story that the concierge told us about the Australian founder of the Tim Tam brand, of the Tim Tam treats, the story he told us that where the founder had traveled to the U.S. and attended the Kentucky Derby in 1958, and the winning horse's name was Tim Tam, and that inspired him to name the product, which he launched a few years later after the name of that horse. And it's grown to be a smashing success worldwide. Well, two things here. One, I would have, and my wife would have walked past that little basket of goodies they had at the hotel front desk. We would have walked past it 100 times out of 100, just on our way, to sightsee. But the concierge insisted that we try this national treat, this Tim Tam, and it was delicious, I'll tell you. And then gave us the history and the lineage and this little short story, just a little short story behind it. But he said it with such passion, and he was so proud to know it. And now I know it. Like, the fact that I know the Tim Tam story is crazy, right? And at this point, now we're fans. So, of course, on the way home, at the duty-free shop before our return flight from Sydney back to America. And yes, I know the duty-free shop is a scam. So no comments, please. I know it's a scam. But my wife bought a large package of Tim Tams to bring back to the States. Voila, a new customer and a new raving fan. And I've already heard her tell our adult son when he was visiting about Tim Tams, and the woman who cared for our house when we were gone about Tim Tams. In fact, she got one. So isn't that funny how 8,000 miles from home, we hear this story, and now we're fans of this brand because of the legacy. So what are you doing in your business to create advocates like that concierge is? He doesn't get anything special from Tim Tam, but he's proud of knowing the lineage, and he's proud of the product from his home country. And so how can you create advocates who then create fans like my wife and I became? So the advocates talk about your product to other people who become fans. So how are you getting your message and your mission to the masses? Do you have an origin story that you continuously share with anyone who will listen? Do you have that elevator speech about your origin, not about what you do and how you can benefit people, but just the cool factor of why you started your business? And your employees share that, and do your customers share that? Your customers. Things to think about as we try to separate our business from the competition. And it doesn't cost anything. The other nugget that I gleaned from working with that same concierge, who was amazing. I couldn't tell you any other concierge names I've ever worked with, but I remember Solomon. Isn't that funny? I remember his name. He made us a dinner reservation at a nicer sushi restaurant. And I know that restaurants provide spiffs and perks to concierge, so that they can garner more business from the hotel guests. So I'm sure he gets something from it to recommend that restaurant. But it's how the restaurant received us that stood out to me. So here's a lesson that I learned, or the lesson that I was reminded of. When we showed up for dinner, we were immediately sat, and then because we were guests of the hotel, right? Because we were sent from Solomon, the server said she was going to give us complimentary edamame and a complimentary sake to start. No charge, just thank you for being patrons of the restaurant and coming from the Marriott. Well, we immediately felt special. We felt like we were getting the royal treatment. And this restaurant, here's the lesson. This restaurant knows by doing this, we would be more apt to spend more money, which we did, and also go back and tell Solomon, the concierge, what a great choice that sushi restaurant was, and thank him for the recommendation. Because when we do that, where do you think he's going to recommend guests to go when they ask for a good sushi restaurant? The one he sent us to, because we came back and reinforced what a great decision that was. And that's exactly what happened. We came back and told them, oh my God, it was fantastic. And they treated us like royalty. And so of course he's going to send more people there. So again, this is kind of reciprocity at work, just in reverse, but it really examine this principle in your business model and see how you can leverage it in an ethical, but repeatable and scalable way. So that when somebody recommends you, how does that feedback come back to them so that they recommend you even more? How do you have that loop become self-fulfilling and accelerate? So there were many more tidbits from Australia, but I'll share just one more. We were able to go up in Queensland. We drove up into Queensland and visited Steve Irwin's zoo, the Crocodile Hunter Zoo. It was founded by his father, but of course, Steve Irwin and all his fame was able to fund it and grow it to 750 acres, and it's just an amazing zoo. It's now run by Steve's widow, because of course Steve has passed, and his son and his daughter. And the day was beyond amazing. We saw all kinds of wildlife and, watched them feed crocodiles, and there were venomous snakes you could look at. And, they had otters and birds and rhinos and giraffes and wallabies. And we even got to pet kangaroos and koalas. Like, a kangaroo is a pretty docile animal, and you just pet them like a dog. It was crazy, just in this open reserve. But what stood out to me were the employees, not the animals, the employees, and how they were so passionate in their work and had an exuded joy. Everyone we spoke to at the Australian Zoo and everyone we met who worked there clearly is all in on the mission. They are passionate about their work and appreciative we were supporting it. Like, you could see it. It was culture at its finest. And, I've said this before, that to be really successful, you must embrace the joy in the work, not the rewards that the work gets you. It's the joy has to be found in the work. And those zoo employees exuded joy in their work. And we felt that as customers, even as they were cleaning out, exhibits, which isn't a fun job, or wrangling koalas out of a tree who wouldn't come down, because they were so high up in the tree and they had to get them down so they can move them around the zoo as they rotate the animals. But they smiled as they did this, as frustrating as it could be, because those koalas weren't going anywhere. They were smiling and laughing as they did this. And it was just a pleasant experience to watch these people find the joy in the work. Now, Steve Irwin has passed, but his enthusiasm, his love for all people and creatures, and his mission to ensure that all species can thrive and coexist is still alive and well at the Australian Zoo, because culture is a top-down job. And clearly his widow and his son and daughter, his children, have continued to build this culture 20 years after his untimely death. So it's not by accident that we had the great experience that we had there. So does your team know your mission? Does your team know why they're doing what they're doing? And do they find the joy in the work, or are they just there for the paycheck? Would the culture grow and thrive even in your absence, as it has at Steve Irwin Zoo? Those questions certainly had me thinking on our trip up there as I drove back from the zoo to our hotel, which was about a 40-minute drive. And just, wow, that culture has gotten even stronger even after his untimely passing. So we thoroughly enjoyed Australia, and I am grateful for the experience. And I want to go back. I definitely want to go back. And just the lessons that I learned were just a cool bonus for that great visit. So if I can, I'll share 2 more quick lessons from my travel abroad that can be directly applied to your business and your career. And again, I use the word lesson. They were really reminders for me, and it made me think, what else am I doing? How else can I capture more value? What else do I need to do when I go back from these trips and enact in my own businesses? This first example is when we traveled to Italy. Again, my first trip to Italy, and this was 15 months ago or so. And I promise you, I'm going back to Italy because that's probably my favorite country I've visited so far, and I've been to several. It's Italy, right? Like, it's Italy. Say no more. But as you know, I'm a huge live music fan, and AC/DC is one of my favorite bands. And on that trip, we were able to see AC/DC play because they coincidentally were playing in Italy during our visit there, our 10-day trip there. And so we booked a night in Reggio Emilia, which is at an Airbnb, which is like a town more in the center of the country. It has an outdoor amphitheater, like this gorgeous new outdoor amphitheater that holds 100,000 people. So people come in from all over Italy for this because Reggio Emilia is not that big. And of course, it was sold out because it was AC/DC. So I'm a huge fan, and I've loved that band since I was, 10 years old. And I'll pay pretty much anything to see them, and definitely want to be up closer to see them. And so we bought tickets in the section closest to the stage. It was, an open amphitheater, so there weren't seats, but you could buy, closer sections. And so we paid more and to get those sections. And as I, sipped my beer and I looked back at 100,000 people, having the best time of their life as I was having, the concept of value extraction came to mind. All of us were enjoying the same concert, the same music at the same exact time, and the same euphoria from seeing Angus duck walk across the stage. But we had different vantage points. And some attendees, like me, were willing to pay more to be closer to the stage. And actually, it wasn't that much more because European promoters don't really, price gouge like some American promoters do, as I've experienced. But this is not a new concept. The same thing happens at football games where you've got people paying $50 in the nosebleeds, and then you've got people paying, $500,000 a year for their skybox. But they're all watching the same game, right? They're all watching, but it's one that needs reinforcement based on my observations of most small and mid-sized business pricing models. The Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule, applied to marketing means that 20% of your customers will always pay 5 to 10 times more for a little better experience, a little better vantage point, a little more TLC, or some more amenities. And then 20% of that 20%, so 4% of the total, could be willing to spend up to 100 times more than the average customer for a better, more unique, custom VIP experience. So the lesson here is if we have one product or one service that we're offering to sell, we're leaving a lot of money on the table because we need to give our customers that are in that 20% the opportunity to pay more for something extra or better. And then going a step further, we need to have a super exclusive offer that is 50 to 100 times more expensive than their core offer that allows that 4% to give you more money so that they can get the VIP treatment of the life, of their lifetime, because they're willing to pay that. Too many times I see small and mid-sized business owners offering one standard package or membership or whatever it is, or one product, or capping the most expensive offering just slightly above the core offer. So maybe they have another offering, but it's just slightly more. And this isn't smart. Optimize your offering so that customers who want to spend more have the opportunity to do so, right? Give them the opportunity to get that extra care, that closer view of the stage, that better experience in your brick and mortar location, that extra coat of paint if you're a house painter, whatever it is. Give somebody the opportunity who's in that 20% that is willing to spend more, the chance to spend more money with you, because they will. And then the last welcome but unexpected reminder I got from traveling internationally actually happened on my return trip. in the States. It's happened a couple times. Of course, when you return to the United States from a foreign country, you have to go through U.S. Customs, even as a citizen. And after a long flight back, it's not the most pleasant experience to wait in another long line and then get the third degree from a customs officer. Where were you and what were you doing overseas? Were you on business and leisure, and why were you doing, and who did you see? And they just grill you, right? They want to make sure that you're supposed to be in our country. Well, to avoid this, several years back, I enrolled in Global Entry, and many of you may have done this, which is really like an express lane to check back into the United States if you're a U.S. citizen. They used to, you'd put in your passport and some facial recognition, you'd answer a couple questions, and then you'd show a ticket, and then you get out, and you're back in the States. Well, now it's because of artificial intelligence, it's all facial recognition, and it's tied to, this giant database that has your airline ticket in there. And, it knows that you are supposed to be in that airport and that you've already been cleared. They've got your fingerprints and all the stuff that you have to do. And you have to do a little interview for Global Entry, which I think you should, so that it's legit. But now you walk off the plane, and if you have Global Entry, you go into the Global Entry return area. You look at a camera and it says, "Welcome back to the United States." The gates open and you go. No passport. You don't talk to anybody. You just go. That's how easy it is. There's no lines. You just, boom, camera, gone. It's so efficient that on my most recent trip, actually back from Australia, I was able to deplane, get through customs, walk 2 terminals down, go back through TSA to check back in the airport, and get to my gate in about 45 minutes. And that's including walking 2 terminals down and going back through TSA and then walking to my gate. Getting off the plane, through customs, all that in 45 minutes. Really, I think maybe a little less than that. So that's not bad for a government-run system. This is a government-run system. And again, the 80-20 rule applies here as well, just as we talked about in the last example, because there will be people, including me and maybe a lot of you, who will pay extra for Global Entry so we don't have to wait. It's a nominal fee. Application process and approval process is not extremely arduous, but you do have to put the effort forth. But we're willing to pay for that. And more so, it made me think about friction. Friction. Customs used to be a high friction experience. We all dread it. And it was not fun. It's like going to the DMV, although that's gotten better too. But all of this unnecessary friction in the process. And in today's world, there's so many processes. And in your business, there are so many processes, even in the buying process, that has unnecessary friction. And with technology where it is today, and artificial intelligence on the bleeding edge, what friction in your business model can be eliminated? What process are you putting your customers through, or your employees? It could be your employees that you're putting them through that could be obsoleted with a little bit of planning and some technology. Now, this is a more difficult question to answer than I would, most of us would think it would be, because we're so close to the problem. We're so close to the process. We probably built the process if we're an entrepreneur. And so it's hard to see where the friction is because we don't recognize it as friction. So what you want to do is and my challenge to you is to ask these great questions of your customers and the downline employees, not the employees maybe that report directly to you, but maybe an employee a level below that or a level below that who will be more open and experiences the friction in your own internal procedures. And then, of course, your customers in the external buying process and then customer support process. Where is there friction that you can eliminate? Because when you eliminate friction, you create a happy, satisfied customer. How much more take-home profit could you generate if you eliminated 20% of the buying friction in your process? If you made it 20% easier for customers to just buy your stuff, to buy your offering. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions? Reducing friction is a powerful, powerful lever that you can pull in business. So examine that. Examine that today. So yeah, I am blessed to have traveled to some places that and seen just some amazing things and experienced these countries. And the lessons have just been icing on the cake. These reminders, these business lessons have been icing on the cake from those trips. but I wanted to share that with you. But my biggest piece of advice that I could share from all my travels is invest in experiences, not things. The luxury cars I've purchased, they've depreciated and I've sold them. The fancy watches, at least mine, they sit in a safe at home and are rarely worn. But the memories I have traveling with the people I love, well, those I'll cherish forever, for a lifetime. Invest in experiences, not things. So with that, remember to set your intentions for the day and strive to thrive. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.